Meanwhile, the AFDB group today in Abuja released a new report that benchmark macroeconomic models for effective policy management in Africa. That 50-page document was presented to an audience of Nigerian government officials and AFDB group officials as well, among others. Erike Ogudele is the officer in charge director at the African Development Institute, and he outlined more about the new report.
In the process of working and supporting regional member countries, we noticed that there was a big gap. And that gap rests on the fact that many of the countries either do not have any macroeconomic model that could assist them with policy making, or when they have some that exist, they do not address emerging challenges that require some recalibration that help them to ensure that those policies actually talk to the realities of the day. We also noticed that some of them were not even prepared by people who are familiar with the context of the countries that they were supposed to address. So we felt, therefore, that it is important that we undertake this important work with a view to understanding how important have some of these countries taken macroeconomic modeling, and to what extent are those models that are developed consistent with the realities in these countries. And the key objective of this study is actually to be able to provide capacity development to regional member countries. And when we talk about capacity development, we're looking at three areas: training, technical assistance, and policy dialogue. We want our capacity development initiatives for the countries to be bottom-up, to be built and driven by what we see the realities in the countries. So the essence of this diagnostic analysis, therefore, is to have that understanding, identify the gaps that exist, and based on that gap, be able to initiate policies that can talk to those specific challenges with a view to supporting the regional member countries. Now, what methodology did we adopt? It was a questionnaire, a survey adopted and implemented through questionnaire. Questions were drafted from us with the help of the African Economic Research Consortium with a view to understanding those basic issues that countries need to know. Now, what are some of the questions that we were looking forward to understanding? Number one, we want to know do countries have models at all, macroeconomic models that serve as a template or as a blueprint for policy making? We also wanted to know what type of macroeconomic models do they have, if they have any one at all, and to what extent do they differ from institutions. Remember, we have central banks on the monetary side, and we have Ministry of Budget and Planning or Finance on the fiscal side. So the point, therefore, is to what extent are there differences between the type of macroeconomic models that these different institutions adopt. We also want to know, when those budgets exist, do they use them? To what extent do they use them to assist policy making? We also want to know what are the outcomes, what are the policy outcomes from using those models, what are the lessons that they learned in the process of using those models? And do these countries have the capability to operationalize the model, to recalibrate this model, and also to be able to, operate and use them in a more efficient way? Are they capable of simulations? Can they also be able to forecast properly to assist the countries to be able to, especially when it comes to data disaggregation, sectoral disaggregation, to what extent are they able to address some of these issues? The point about flexibility also come in. To what extent are these models flexible, that they can easily change them, modify them to address some emerging challenges, like COVID, for example, like the geopolitical tensions going on, for example, So these are some of the things that we also look forward to know. And who is supporting the countries to develop this model, and who are the countries? Are they able to manage them by themselves, or do they rely on external partners to do this for them? So these are some of the key things we really look forward to understanding. So let's talk briefly then about some of the findings that we have in this model. Now, the first thing we find here is the response rate. Again, like I mentioned, we had a questionnaire that we administered to all the 54 regional member countries of the bank. But at the end of the day, we received only 31 responses. So you can imagine, out of 54, only 31 countries responded, which is just less than 60% of the response rate. Well, for survey, some of us will say that's good enough, because as we do know, it's always very difficult when you're undertaking surveys. Many times you don't receive feedback from countries. So we have this number of countries, 31, who responded. And in terms of the language classification, we have 52 from Anglophone and 45 from Francophone and 3 from Lusophone.